Business cases are about working out the right course of action to make something better. That starts with being clear about what outcomes you want to achieve. The best objectives to help prepare a business case are SMART: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. SMART objectives give us a concrete benchmark for comparing the merits of different options. This video briefly outlines how SMART objectives help to analyse and communicate what will be affected by each option, how much it will be affected, and which option, if any, is the best way to meet the objectives. Business cases aren't just about comparing the costs of different options. They're also about comparing the effectiveness and value for money of those options. The expected effects of an option, good and bad, can be expressed as metrics. By estimating the value of those metrics for each option, we can compare their relative merits. For example, if the primary objective is to reduce the number of deaths and injuries from people falling off a cliff within 6 months, then we need to compare the baseline numbers of deaths and injuries, the numbers we expect under each option, and how long it will take for each option to have an effect. Once we start considering options to address the primary objective, we often find that new objectives and related metrics start to suggest themselves. For example, options in this case might include putting up warning signs or building a high fence near the edge of the cliff. Perhaps we could block access to the clifftop area altogether. But if there's already a popular neighbourhood park at the top of the cliff, then each of those options will have other effects we need to consider too. Most public policy business cases have more than one objective, and they often pull decision makers in different directions. We want to minimise injuries and deaths, but we also want to maximise the amenity of public parks and scenic views. Our business case will need to compare the relative merits of each option on all these dimensions to inform a decision. Now that we know what we want to compare, we need to work out how to estimate the effect size for each option. Specific and measurable objectives can help us to identify relevant metrics and supporting evidence. For example, perhaps we can find examples of similar clifftop parks where signage was installed and analyse the number of deaths and injuries from falls before and after those signs were installed. If so, we could reasonably assume that signage at our clifftop will be similarly effective, giving us a basis to estimate its effects. But some effects can be trickier to estimate, like the value of visual amenity in the park. If a big fence to stop people from falling off the cliff would also ruin the view, then we'll need to assign a value to that view. Perhaps we could compare the cost of a house with a view of the clifftop with the cost of a similar house nearby that doesn't have a view. That price difference gives us an estimated value of visual amenity and a baseline against which to compare the effects of each option. The more specific and measurable the objectives, and the more relevant those objectives are to the problem the business case is trying to solve, then the more useful the business case will be to compare the relative costs and benefits of each option. But sometimes it's not enough for an option to be relatively better across all relevant metrics. There might be an absolute requirement, like a concrete deadline, that needs to be met for any option to be acceptable. When an outcome has a deadline, we place more weight on how long each option will take to achieve the objective. That might mean the most effective and cost-effective option isn't always the best choice. SMART objectives help to clarify what matters most, so we can assess the merits of each option based on those priorities. SMART objectives help business cases, and the people who write and rely on them, to analyse what will be affected by each option, how much it will be affected, and which option, if any, is the best way to meet our objectives. The smarter our objectives, the smarter our analysis and our investment decisions can be. Thank you for watching.